Before the town, before the creatures, before the barn and the blood and the man in yellow, before any of it, From gives us one scene. The very first thing it ever shows us about the Matthews family. Julie is in the back of the RV using finger puppets to act out a story for her little brother. The story is from a children's book Ethan loves, a book called Flight of the Cromenockle. She's playing out a scene where a character named Norman gets wounded by a monster and dies. Ethan gets upset. He doesn't want Norman to die. He tells Julie that Norman needs to be taken to the Lake of Tears, where the fairies will bring him back to life. Julie refuses. Ethan cries to their mom. That is how From begins, with a children's book. A dead character, a grieving little boy, and the Lake of Tears is the place where death gets reversed. Now it's Season 4, Episode 2. Jim is dead, Ethan is alone at the RV, and his dead father appears and says one thing: find the Lake of Tears. The show opened with that book. 4 seasons later, it's still pulling the strings. So here's the question I've been sitting with since I went back through every single reference to this book across all 4 seasons. A question that once you ask it, you cannot unask it. What if the book isn't fiction? What if it was written for Ethan specifically? What if every parallel he's drawn between that story and this town, every location, every creature, every clue, wasn't coincidence? And what if the person who wrote it is someone he's known his entire life? Let's start with the foundation, because there's a detail about Flight of the Cromenockle that I don't think enough people have properly absorbed. This book does not exist in the real world. It is not a novel you can buy anywhere. It was created specifically for this show, by the writers of this show, and it exists in From's universe as a published children's fantasy novel credited to an author named Kay Dillon. Ethan has it with him in the RV before the family ever enters the town. Tabitha reads it to him after he's injured on their first night. He references it constantly across 4 seasons to decode the rules of this place. Think about what that means. The writers of From created a fictional children's book, gave it a title, gave it an author, gave it specific locations, specific characters, specific plot points, and then spent 4 seasons having those plot points mirror the actual events of the show with extraordinary precision. That is not decoration, that is architecture. The Cromenockle herself is a character on a quest, lost, trying to find her way home, encountering obstacles and strange places and creatures she doesn't understand. The Lake of Tears is a location in the book where Norman is brought back by fairies after dying. The Cavern of the Lonely Dragon is a place full of things nobody wanted, but hidden inside it is the map of the rainbow sky, the thing the Cromenockle needs to find her way home. Ethan compared Colony House's storage room directly to that cavern and said the map might be hiding there. In Season 1, Episode 9, Ethan says something about Victor's drawings that I need you to hold on to. He says, "They all fit together and tell a story, and once we figure out the story, we'll know what to do next." That's how it works. We can't finish the quest unless we figure out the story. He's talking about drawings on a wall, but the framework he's using, everything is a story, read the story to survive, that's the Cromenockle's logic. That's book logic, applied to a supernatural nightmare town. A child learned to think that way because a book taught him to. And the book only exists inside From's universe, credited to someone called Kay Dillon who appears nowhere else in the show. No character references meeting her, no history. The minimum amount of identity needed to publish a children's novel, which means someone in this story wrote it, and they didn't want anyone to know who they were. Before we get to Julie, I need to go to a scene that almost nobody is connecting to this theory, because the show told us this was the framework for everything, whereas back in Season 1, Episode 6, Father Khatri is in the church basement with Sarah, and he tells her something that has always felt significant but now feels like the key to the entire show. He says, "People think the Bible's a fixed object and something written, completed. But how can the story be finished if all the players remain on stage? 73 books filled with tales of miracle and wonder. But there's also darkness. Since I arrived, there's a question I keep coming back to. What if we, the people of this town, are living the book that is yet to be written? What if this is book 74? The story that's still happening, still being told, with all the players still on the stage. Khatri is saying the residents aren't just trapped in a nightmare. They are living inside a story that hasn't been finished yet, a book without an author, a quest without a map. Now connect that to everything we know about Flight of the Cromenockle. If the residents are living book 74, the unwritten book, and if Julie Matthews is a story walker who can move through time and cannot change anything but can observe and interact with the past, then Julie is the only person in this town with the actual ability to write that book retroactively, to become the author of the story she's trapped in, to travel back far enough, understand enough of what happened and what's going to happen, and put it in a form that could reach the one person who needs it most, not as a warning, not as a survival guide adults could use, as a children's book, the kind a little boy would carry everywhere, memorize completely, and use unconsciously to decode every impossible thing he encounters. To understand how Julie could have written the Cromenockle, you need to understand exactly what story walking means and, more importantly, what its one loophole is. Julie can move through time, but she can't change anything. That rule has been tested and confirmed twice. In Season 3's finale, a future version of Julie, shorter hair, different clothes, scratches on her face, appears and tries to warn Jim that the man in yellow is about to kill him. She knows exactly what's coming. She's desperate, and she fails completely. The man in yellow kills Jim anyway. You can't change the story, you can only walk through it. In Season 4, Episode 2, present-day Julie deliberately walks into a past moment. She goes to Randall, asks him to watch her body, enters the ruins, and drops into the past. She tries to warn Jim during the Season 2 kidnapping arc. A creature grabs her and Randall pulls her out. She still can't change it. The rule is absolute. But here's what everyone is missing about that rule. The rule says you can't change what happened. It doesn't say you can't leave something behind. Think about what story walking actually allows. Julie threw the rope to Boyd in Season 2. She was always the one who did that. The show confirmed it. That means Julie was physically present in a past moment she didn't consciously know she was part of. She interacted with the story, she left an impact, she didn't change anything, she was always there. It was always her rope. Whatever happened, happened, including her throwing it. Now apply that logic to the book. If Julie eventually travels back far enough, back to a time before the family entered the town, back to the real world outside it, she could write the Cromenockle. She wouldn't be changing anything. The book was always written. Kay Dillon was always the pseudonym. The book was always on Ethan's shelf. The family was always familiar with it before the road trip. If Julie is always the one who wrote it, then nothing changes. That is the loophole. You can't rewrite the chapters, but you can author them in the first place. Now let me walk you through what the show has actually given us, because this isn't just a clever theory. The breadcrumbs are everywhere once you know what to look for the first scene. Julie acts out the Cromenockle story with finger puppets before the family enters the town. She knows it well enough to perform it. She knows Norman. She knows the Lake of Tears. Of everyone in that RV, Julie has the deepest relationship with the book's details. The very first thing From ever shows us about Julie is her performing a story she may have written, Ethan's first vision. On his first night in the town, after the crash after surgery, Ethan wakes and tells Jim he saw the Lake of Tears in a drawing on the wall, a location from the book. The town's first communication with Ethan used the book's own language to deliver it, as if whoever wrote it knew exactly how this place speaks. In Season 1, Episode 6, Ethan compares Colony House's storage room to the Cavern of the Lonely Dragon, full of things nobody wanted but hiding the map of the rainbow sky inside. He suggests the map might be in that room. Tabitha immediately finds a bracelet that turns out to be significant. The book didn't just emotionally parallel the town, it gave them a practical direction that led to a real discovery. Ethan's Episode 9, quote, he tells people stop treating Victor's drawings like a puzzle. They all fit together and tell a story, and once we figure out the story, we'll know what to do next. That's how it works. We can't finish the quest unless we figure out the story. A child is applying story logic to a supernatural mystery, not because it's intuitive, Because a book trained him to think exactly that way. If Julie wrote it, she specifically designed it to teach Ethan the one framework this town actually responds to. The Lake of Tears in Season 4. Jim's ghost tells Ethan to find it, a location from the book, not something discovered, not something an adult explained, a place from a children's story he's had since before the road trip. If Julie wrote the book, she knew this moment was coming. She couldn't tell Ethan directly, so she put the destination inside a story and made sure he loved it enough to memorize it before he ever needed it. Kay Dillon doesn't exist. The author credited on the Cromenockle appears nowhere else in From's universe. No history, no other books, just a name on a cover, the minimum required to publish, the kind of name you'd create if you needed to put something into the world without drawing attention to who you really were. The question is, why does it have to be Julie? Why couldn't the town itself have created the book, or Tabitha, across a past life? Because the Cromenockle requires an author who has specific knowledge of the town's locations, its creatures, its logic, and who exists in the real world long enough to write and publish something that finds its way onto Ethan's shelf before the road trip. That is a very specific set of requirements. Tabitha's past lives exist inside the town, not outside it. She has no mechanism for publishing something in the real world. Boyd, Jade, Victor, none of them move through time at all. Julie does. Julie is confirmed to physically interact with the past. She threw the rope to Boyd in Season 2. She was always the one who did that. The show confirmed it. A future version of her appeared in the Season 3 finale with scratches on her face, suggesting she'd already been through something significant before that moment. Season 4 is building toward her going further and further back. The trajectory is clear, and crucially, she can't change anything. Which means if she writes the book, it was always written. She can't decide not to. She was always Kay Dillon. The book was always published. Ethan always had it. The only question is whether she knows yet. Those scratches on future Julie's face are worth sitting with. Something hurt her during a story walk before the Season 3 finale. The creature that attacked her in Episode 2's walk may be part of it. She's getting closer to something the town doesn't want her to reach, because if she reaches it, she writes the book. She authors the loop from the inside. Every element of the Cromenockle maps onto From's mythology with frightening precision. The Cromenockle is lost in a strange world, trying to find her way home, encountering creatures, finding a cavern with a hidden map inside it. She reaches the Lake of Tears where Norman is brought back to life. The Cromenockle is the Matthews family. The Cavern of the Lonely Dragon is Colony House's storage room full of things left behind by the dead, with something guiding them forward hidden inside. The Lake of Tears is real. A dead man just sent a child to find it, and Norman. Norman dies and needs the lake to come back. Norman is Jim. The book told Ethan how his father's story ends, not in a way he'd understand until it happened, but encoded in a story he already loved. Julie knew Jim was going to die. She tried to stop it in the Season 3 finale and failed. So instead of trying again, she did the only thing story walking actually allows. She wrote her little brother a book, she put the ending inside it, and she made sure he had it years before either of them ever needed it. Here's where I need you to sit with something uncomfortable. Because the full implication of this theory isn't comforting, it's devastating. If Julie wrote the Cromenockle, she knew. She knew Jim was going to die. She knew the Lake of Tears was where Ethan would be sent. She knew Norman was Jim before Norman was ever Jim. She couldn't stop it. She tried. Future Julie ran through the forest with scratches on her face, screaming her father's name. The man in yellow killed him anyway. So she wrote a book instead. Think about what that means for every scene where Julie reads the Cromenockle with Ethan. Every time she acts it out with finger puppets. Every time she tries to reference it to comfort him, and he snaps at her because he's scared or angry. She's sitting there with her little brother reading a book she wrote to prepare him for a grief she already knows is coming. She can't tell him. She can't warn him. She can't change it. All she can do is make sure that when it happens, when Norman dies, Ethan already knows where the lake is. 4 seasons later, Jim is dead. Ethan has a mission, and that mission points to a location from the book Ethan has loved his entire life. Either the universe of From put exactly the right book in exactly the right child's hands by coincidence, or someone who walked through the story, who saw it all, who tried to change it and couldn't, who sat with her little brother reading the same pages over and over, knowing what was coming and being unable to say a word, found the one thing a storywalker can actually do. She couldn't save him from the story, so she wrote him a map to survive it, and Ethan Matthews has been following it since before he ever knew he was lost.